So you've got a set of data and you need to describe it. There's actually two ways that you can describe data. One is numerically, one is graphically. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 key numbers that you would want to describe a set of data numerically. What's up, y'all? I'm Tom, and this is Like a Math Class. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5-number summary, and let's get to it. A 5-number summary is just that. It's 5 very specifically chosen values for a set of data that will help you describe what that data represents. Not just what it represents, but really the distribution of that data. In this video, we're going to talk about a set of data that's got 15 or an odd number of data values in it. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video where we talk about how you might find some of these values using an even set of data. First off, we've got 2 very easily found data values from our 5-number summary. The first being the minimum value. The minimum is the smallest value in your data set. And of course, the maximum value is the largest value in your data set. Now, what about some of these other pieces, the quartiles and the median? The median is the middle value in an ordered data set. And by ordered, I mean that it has to be in order from lowest to largest. So here we can see in our data set here we've got it all organized from lowest to largest. Now the quartiles, quartile 1 is just the 25th percentile of the data set. And we sometimes call that Q1. We use the abbreviation Q1 for that. So down here we've got Q3, quartile 3, which is the 75th percentile of the data set. And if you think, hey, the median is the middle, well, that's going to be the 50% in the middle, so that you could also call quartile 2. And quartile 2 is the same thing as the median. It's the 50th percentile. So we could also call this the 50th percentile. Sometimes in spreadsheets, you'll be using a quartile function, so you could use Q2 to find the median, or you could use the median function in a spreadsheet. In our graphing calculators, we typically use the TI-84, and in that it's the median is just labeled as the median. It's not labeled as Q2. But the other quartiles, Q1 and Q3, are labeled as such. So you should be able to bounce between Q2 and median depending on the context in which you're using it. So again, if we're kind of looking at these as we go step by step, this is 25% of your data. And what that means is when you're talking about a percentile, you're going 25% of your data, everything up to and including the 25th percentile of your data. So when we say percentile, we're not talking about a percentage of a number. We're talking about kind of a grouping of numbers. So 25% of your data values. So if, we'll look at what that means in chunks as opposed to 25%. That's slightly different. If we're going from the minimum to the median, that's going to be 50% of our data. And if we go up to the quartile 3 from our minimum, that's going to be 75% of your data. And of course, if we go from the minimum all the way up to our max, that is going to be 100% of your data. So what we say down here at the bottom is we want to find the 5-number summary for this set of data. So easily enough, here is our minimum and here is our maximum, right? We've already got the data already organized. It's in numerical order, and if you count on your screen or you'll just trust me, we have 15 data values. I usually go to find the median next. So the median, we have a way that we talked about in other videos to find the median, and you could do it really 2 ways. You could chop off from both sides until you get to the center, or you could do a quick trick called, not really called anything, and we could take n plus 1 and divide it by 2, n being the total number of data values that you have, and that's going to give you the position of the median. So if I've got 15 values, of course n plus 1 is going to be 16. 16 divided by 2 is going to be 8. So in the 8th position is where we're going to find our median. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 168 right here, this is going to be our median, or quartile 2, depending on what you want to call it. Now, how do we find quartile 1? Quartile 1 is just the median of this set of data. It's almost like we're considering this our maximum for the moment. So if we're considering this our maximum and this our minimum for finding the middle of this chunk of data, then we need to get right in the middle of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to be looking in between these two sets of values. So our quartile 1 is going to be right here. That's quartile 1. And we can find that value by taking 157 plus 161 and dividing it by 2, basically finding the average of that, and that is going to be 159. So there is our quartile 1. And then lastly, we're going to find the middle of this set of data. So again, we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to be right in the middle here. And so this is also going to be our quartile 3, or 174.5, directly in the center of these two data values. Now notice that the two quartiles aren't actual data values, but what they are doing is they are separating this into chunks. So here we've got 25% of our data, not 25% of a value, but 25% of our data is these four numbers right here. And then as we look for our next 25%, that's going to be these values right here. This is also going to be 25% of our total data values. So here, if we've got 4, we're including the minimum, 1, 2, 3. And here we've got 168, 1, 2, 3, so we've got 4 pieces of data there. Now our next set of data, our next 25% of data are going to be these. So we've got 25% of our data is right here. Remember, it's not 25% of a specific value, it's 25% of our data is here, 25% of our data is here, 25% of our data, 25% of our data. So we're grouping all of our data and we're chopping it into 4 groups. And then finally, our last 25% is this chunk right here. So here's our last 25% of data. So you might be questioning, like, well, why are we using 168 twice? Well, here you notice we're using our maximum value and we're counting these 4 pieces of data. And if we're looking at this, we need to have our minimum value of this. So here we've got our minimum value of this chunk, and we've got 1, 2, 3 pieces of data. Over here, we've got our maximum now of this chunk, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And then finally, we've got our minimum value, 1, 2, 3, 4. So all of these things are using one of the data values that we have in our data set, and then we're going to kind of that midway point, or a spot where it's kind of cutting off the data values. So every chunk is including a value, and then it's going to kind of a, not really an arbitrary, but a value that's not in our actual data set to cut it off between the different percentiles. So if I wanted to actually summarize this and say, what are the 5 numbers? I would say my minimum is 144. My quartile 1 is going to be 159. My median is going to be 168. My quartile 3 is going to be 174.5. And my maximum value is going to be 181. So that's not going to do a whole lot for us yet, but we're going to use that graphically in the next video when we talk about the box plot. Now, if you got this far, I did say what would happen if we had an even set of numbers. So let's look at how we might find how it might be different to find the median and the quartiles if you've got an even set of data versus an odd set of data. And so I have right down here the same data sets, but I've just added on one extra data item to have 16 data values here. So we already know that we've got our median here, we've got our minimum value here, we've got our maximum value here, and then we have our quartile 1 is right here, and we have our quartile 2 right here. Or sorry, our quartile 3 right here. So what happens now if we're trying to find the middle of this? Again, I still use this idea of an n+1 divided by 2. Some teachers don't necessarily like to use this because it really only works for the median. I wouldn't get into, even if you think of like this is going to say, hey, I'm going to take 50% of the data values. I wouldn't go into 1/4 and 3/4. I wouldn't use that though, because if you're using the 1/4 or the 3/4, you're going to get some strange numbers in between the quartiles or in between the sets of data. So I would use the median to find the center, and then take the median of the lower chunk of data, the lower 50%, and the median of the upper 50% of the data. We know that this was 15 data items, so this is going to be 16, because we see we got that 1 extra. So 16 plus 1 is going to be 17 divided by 2, which is going to be 8.5. So now we want to go in the middle of 8 and 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So now here is our median. And at this point now we would have to find the average of these two things, which is going to be 169. Here is our minimum. Here is our max. And now when we're trying to find our quartiles, we want to find what is the middle of this chunk right here. So notice we're not going to be using the actual 168 like we did up here. We're kind of in between here. So to find the quartile 1, I'm going to find the median of this set of data. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be in between these two values right here. So here is my quartile 1. And it's going to be between 157 and 161. So that actually hasn't done anything for our whole data set here. And if we look on the other side, we're going to be looking for what's happening between this set. Where is the middle of this set of data? And again, we already know it's going to be 4.5 in, or in between the 4th and 5th data, so data points, 1, 2, 3, 4, in between these two. So it's going to be right here, and that's going to be our quartile 3. Now that's changed a little bit because we added on this extra data item there. But down here, it didn't really change much at all. And this did change as well, just a touch. So what we saw is as we had a larger set of data, everything kind of shifted over just a touch from the median on up. But really the thing that I want you to get from this, when we find the medians of these things, when we find the quartiles of these things, you're still going to be chunking it into 4 parts. So just like we had up above, we've got our first 4 the first 25% of our data. We've got the second 25% of our data. We've got the third 25% of our data, and we've got the last 25% of our data. So make sure when it's all said and done that you find that median of the whole set of data, and then take the middle of the first 50% and take the middle of the second 50%. That's really what it boils down to. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, make sure you give me a thumbs up. And in the next video, we're going to talk about how to apply these 5 numbers to a box plot where we can look at a distribution of the data and be able to kind of see what does the spread of these different data values look like. I'll see you in the next video.